Well, it's time for another Uncork conversation. And tonight I'm having a great conversation, actually over Zoom. And it's been painful to get here because all the technology, um, I don't know, demons, call them what you want. I don't know what you want to call them, but all of them are arrayed against us tonight because it's taken a bunch of time to figure this thing out. So I'm in need of a drink, and all good conversations start with a drink. And tonight I'm going to be spending time talking to a good friend of mine, Shelby. Shelby, it's good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, it's awesome. So, I don't normally, I'm not a cocktail person normally, although I do like cocktails, but we decided tonight to be different. So it's not wine. It's not scotch because I don't think you don't drink scotch. Maybe you do, Shelby. Do you drink scotch?
From time to
From
time,
time
but
to
it's
time.
situational for sure.
Situational. Well, tonight we're going to actually celebrate with a gin smash. So hold on a second, because every good conversation starts with a good drink. I'm going to open my gin smash, and
Absolutely.
I'm going to go ready, I'm going to get ready to go. So, cheers to you.
Perfect. Cheers
Cheers.
to you, Tim. Thank you
Nice.
so much.
Yeah, that's good. All right, so
Yeah.
let me introduce this conversation.
Okay.
This is a test for me in that this is the first remote recording that I've done of an Uncorked conversation. So I believe that my producer is going to do an amazing job making it sound good, but this is a new experience, and we'll see how it works. It's not the same as being in a room. I really wish we could be in a room together.
Yeah.
That would be best for me. But technology being what it is, it's not bad. It's almost like being there.
Yeah. Well, and the pandemic and all the other
All
obstacles,
the
we're
other
doing
thing,
pretty well.
exactly. 2020 will be the year that we will all want to forget, I think. I think that's for
Yeah,
sure.
you never know, right?
Yeah, no,
Crazy.
no, it is crazy. So let's kick this conversation off. Let me, for those of you listening, let me give you a little context for my relationship with Shelby. So tonight I'm going to have a conversation with Shelby Wallace, and Shelby lives in Vancouver. I live near Toronto, and the history of our relationships goes back 8 years. So 8 years ago, Shelby was working for a company that I was doing training and consulting for. And I did a training experience out in Western Canada, and Shelby at that time was a member of that team. And so Shelby participated in that experience in 2012. That's when we originally met. So it was an experience where I would fly out, we would do coaching and training, then we'd follow up, and it was a sales course experience because that's the place that Shelby was at in her life that time, and that's what she was doing. And so there was connection that we had. It was over about almost a year period, I think, Shelby, that we had fairly
Hmm.
regular connection in that experience. And I remember when I met you for the first time, I was super impressed with you as a person and just the way that you
Oh,
carried
thank you.
yourself and the way that you did things. And then, as time goes on, I moved on to other things. You continued to do other things and move on to other things, and really lost track. We lost track of each other for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then for me, and again, this is my story. Your story could be different, but my recollection is that somehow through LinkedIn, we got
Hmm.
reconnected just from posts I would see that you were doing and posts that you saw that I was doing. And I can remember it was January, I believe it was January, late January of 2020, just before COVID and all of that. And I was in Las Vegas doing
Yeah.
training with a customer of mine, and I I just decided, you know what, I think I'm going to give you a call because I was coming up to Vancouver, and we made an
Hmm.
opportunity to sit down and say, hey, where are we at in our lives? And I remember I remember the feeling when we connected and when I came out to Vancouver, because when we met again after, so now 2012, we probably didn't see each other for since 2013 probably, so it
Yeah.
was 7 years. It was
Yeah.
very clear to me that something transformational had happened in your life.
Hmm.
You were and are fundamentally a different person, and that was intriguing to me. That was absolutely mesmerizing, because I remember sitting there thinking, how does that happen? What is going on? And of
Yeah.
course, as we got caught up and I got a chance to hear a little bit more about what you were doing in your life, and that's led us to the new season of our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really great for me is there's been a transition in the relationship, in the sense that,
Yeah.
2012, 2013, I was, in a sense, the teacher mentor. And now those roles are
Mm-hmm.
changed, because now you're my life coach. And
Yeah.
so now we're in a different season of our relationship, where the give and take is different.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yeah.
just for those listening, sort of as we come into where things are now, Shelby now provides me life coaching, which is something that's new to me and it's been really interesting. We'll maybe braille that a little bit tonight as well. But the interesting thing in that is that that's led to a relationship for you with a group of people that I have
Mm-hmm.
created a network, what I call the Fervesco Network, which is a company that I own. And it's a group of consultants that come together once a month via Zoom and chat and encourage each other. And
Mm-hmm.
now you're part of that. So it's been
Yeah.
a really fascinating journey for me when you think of, 2012 to now 2020,
Mm-hmm.
things have changed. So that's sort of the genesis of this conversation, because now the relationship's different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You are helping me grow. I may have helped you grow in the past, but you're helping me grow as a
You
person.
absolutely did. Yeah.
And so it's a really great opportunity. So
Yeah.
here's my question to you. First of all, maybe
Okay.
if you want to tell your side of that story, because it could be different. I don't know. Your
Mm-hmm.
story might be different, but I also really want to ask you that question, if you would share with people. So what's brought you to this moment in your life now? Like what is happening, and what has happened to you, and what is it causing to happen in your life?
Well, and it's interesting, and it's quite like what you had said, is that it truly has been a transformation for me. Feeling like I started the first half of my life in a very, um, I don't know, earthbound, kind of practical side of business development and sales, and coming through that. And then at the point where we had met and you were providing us with all that coaching and training and mentorship, that was something that I saw as kind of the beginning point of this transformation that I went through. And just learning new skills and learning more about myself has been definitely part of this journey. So from the transition, 8 years ago now, 2012, to where I am, and feeling so inspired by the work that we had done together, feeling like, maybe this is something that I could be doing as well. So slowly transitioning out of this practical business development world and trying to move into life coaching. And when we had met back in January, I was almost through a course over at Rhodes College in Vancouver. And yeah, just looking to start a more holistic practice where I can have my own clients and be able to provide business services as well as life coaching services, which I think are quite a bit more intertwined than even some people would believe.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Now, it's interesting
And then
because,
when we had,
no, go ahead.
oh, no, go ahead.
I think
Go
it's
ahead, Jen.
interesting because your background is really very, very practical. Because I think your original
Yeah,
degree, if I recall, is in industrial design.
it is. Yeah. I started out in carpentry and furniture making. So, like, genuinely working on the tools and thinking I was going to have a red ceiling carpentry and obviously move into whether it was like an actual working space or like owning my own company eventually. That had always been something that I was looking for. But, coming from Alberta, moving to Vancouver, I had just finished my degree in design over at the U of A. And then when I moved over to Vancouver, if you've been to both places, Alberta, Edmonton is vastly different than a place like Vancouver. And it's almost like a metaphor for where the first half of my life was spent. And then now the second half of my life is moved into a different space and allowed for, I would say, an opening of something that's always been there, but just hadn't been exercised.
Interesting. So caused you to decide that life coaching, like this idea of life coaching, and then you've taken this degree course now on life coaching? What what caused you to say, hey, this is where I want to start to move. This is what I want to start to do?
I honestly felt like I was already doing it to a certain capacity. Like it had been something that came quite naturally to me, whether it was, through friends or family, just people looking for advice or guidance or mentorship in, more of a friendship level. And also I found it at work through business development contacts that people were starting to get a lot more personal with me about, things outside of their business and, sales for the month and that sort of thing and strategy. It started to become personal in conversation. And I started to notice how much, basically that information is so connected to people's prosperity and their business. You could find patterns within both areas that could maybe shed some light on where some improvements could be made, some adjustments to help people get to where they want to be in their, whether it was business focused or not.
Right. Yeah.
Both
So,
areas had really relevant information.
right. So when, one of the things that for me over the years, I mean, and I don't know if I vacillated between these two things, or maybe I'm, in my business, maybe I've been both, but, we have these two ideas and maybe we can see them as a continuum, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's the best way to see them. But, if on one side, I think of consulting, um, and I think of that word. I think of consulting. On the other end
Yeah.
of that continuum, I see coaching. They're different.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but so my question to you would be is that as you look at those two words, what do they mean to you, and
Mm-hmm.
how does that work out for you currently in what you're doing? Because what you're doing is quite unique.
Mm-hmm.
It's unique. And I know from my own
Mm-hmm.
experience working with you, and I've worked with other coaches over the years, and really, I guess what I want the listeners in this, as they hear this conversation, I want to bring them into this world of coaching and consulting a little bit, and really,
Mm-hmm.
if they never had a coach, or whether it's a professional coach or a life coach, I'm going to encourage.
Yeah.
I want to encourage my listeners to braille that out, because it's been so very beneficial to me over the years. But there's these sort of things that we do in this sphere, consulting, coaching. What
Mm-hmm.
does that look like for you, and where do you see yourself sort of on that continuum?
Mm-hmm. Well, the difference between the two, I believe, for me, consulting tends to be more, I have more skin in the game. I'm genuinely giving you, whether it's advice or it's actually like putting together a plan and a strategy to work with somebody, usually with their business. And then whereas coaching tends to sit more in a personal space for me, from my perception. So, and that could go from anything from empathic healing, which is sitting with somebody and sitting with whatever it is that, they're going through, and, sifting through some of the patterns that keep reoccurring for them that they're trying to work through. And then having this sense of accountability. So where are you today and where would you like to be? But it's a little bit less involved in terms of like where the consulting tends to be more hands-on. Coaching tends to be a little bit more having, basically you have your client lead the session quite a bit
Mhm.
more. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, I do coaching, but I wouldn't say, I wouldn't define myself primarily as a coach. More than
Mm-hmm.
likely, I think more of what I do is consulting training, and
Mm-hmm.
I do some coaching in the context of that, but I'm not formally trained as a coach. I think I have some natural intuition that
Yeah,
bends
absolutely you
towards
do.
that. But at the same time, it's not my, I wouldn't consider it my area of expertise. That's for sure. So
Mm-hmm.
when you look at, so right now you have a blended career right now, because you're
Yeah.
like many people who starts to envision something different for themselves. it's not always sort of cold turkey. Here I am today, and now boom,
Mm-hmm.
this line comes down, and now I do this thing.
Yeah.
You're in a journey of transition right now. So,
Mm-hmm.
so you have two very different worlds that you play in, right?
Yeah. Very different.
Yeah.
Very different.
So what are
And
those worlds? Like, how does that work?
well, from my perspective, I see it as being moving from almost like the head space to the heart space. The head space being this super nuts and bolts practical consulting, in my day-to-day business development and sales in building trades, essentially. So in wholesale business versus something that's a lot more personal and a lot more emotional space. So it's almost, like a metaphor, trying to combine the two, the head and the heart,
Hmm.
putting them together for people, for clients of mine, so that they can move forward in whatever it is that they're looking to accomplish.
So as you've started to make that transition and envision that, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know, maybe you had a certain day and time and you had a moment, an epiphany, and said, this is what I want to do. And you started your journey from there. I don't know how it happened for you, but,
Mm-hmm.
but as you envision moving into this new world,
Mm-hmm.
um, how, h- how have you found that journey so far? Has it been easy? Has it been difficult? Has it like how's it felt as you've begun to say, I want to
Yeah.
become something different?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's felt very uncomfortable. In this feeling of being a little bit stuck and kind of on the precipice of change, but not really knowing what that change is. And then, whether it's like forced change. So for me, I saw that as being, okay, so I'll take a life coaching course and see where this takes me. And then hoping to basically have the framework so I can start my own business. And then honestly, just trying to do it organically. I had plenty of experience in the past trying to push and, will my way towards where I thought I was going to be. And then in the end, it just ended up feeling quite a bit more painful. And I felt like I wasn't in the right space. So I think this time I was taking a lot more of an intuitive approach to kind of basically to help guide me towards something that was more who I am and how I can connect with people on a more personal level,
Hmm.
but then also bring in the experience of my past to help them as well.
Yeah. You
So
know,
I collected evidence, I guess.
yeah. And the reason I ask the question is because,
Mm-hmm.
as you know, the arc of my podcast is about this idea of uncommodification, of
Yeah.
standing out, of being different,
Mm-hmm.
which again doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey for all of us.
Yeah,
So
for
the one
sure.
thing that I see in this, and is is this is a conversation I've had with so many people over the years, where you're doing something that
Mm-hmm.
maybe you really love, or maybe you're doing it because this is sort of how, what was expected of you in your life, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You have this thing. It's called a
Yeah.
job, and it's great,
Mm-hmm.
and you're great at it, and you love it, and you love parts of it. Yet you come to a place where you
Mm-hmm.
start to say, this isn't who I am in my entirety. This
Mm-hmm.
isn't all I can be. And then I think we begin this process,
Mm-hmm.
that I would call uncommodification, where we start
Yeah.
challenging ourselves to throw off our mask, to throw off our convention, to throw off the things that we've built around ourselves so that we can fit
Yeah.
into the worlds we've chosen, and then we
Totally.
move in a different path. And that's the intriguing thing
Mm-hmm.
to me about this conversation, because
Mm-hmm.
you're in the midst of that. You're living inside of that experience. It's like the metamorphosis, right, between
Yeah.
that happens between a caterpillar and a butterfly. You're in,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know where you are in that journey, but maybe you're a little bound up in the chrysalis, and maybe you're trying to spread your
Yeah.
wings and get out. I don't know what you're. I don't know.
Yeah. Hopefully there's a little bit of daylight
I
coming
think.
through
Well,
in this
I
phase.
think you are. You're starting to break out, right? You're starting to
Yeah.
break into something new and become
Mm-hmm.
something new, and maybe not just new, but become more of who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it as an opening, like you say, emerging from the chrysalis and coming out with something that hasn't really been done, even though people have an understanding of the basic frameworks of both sides of that business, the consulting and the coaching and that sort of thing. And, like you said about being uncommodified, it's essentially, that's where I'm moving out of, is coming out of this like familial and cultural expectations of, how do I survive and, make money and pay bills like everyone else. But at the same moment, I came to this point where I just felt like this can't be it. Like this can't be what I do forever. It's just didn't feel like enough.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and like through a series of, some spiritual explorations I had done as well, and some life experiences I had thrown myself into, I took some really big life risks to try and shake things up and to find out where I was going to change. And then basically coming back around to, okay, it's actually time to be still and be quiet and learn and try and understand where to move next.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, it's
yeah,
and that's
yeah,
not an easy part of the
it's
journey.
tough.
That's a
No,
tough part of the
no,
journey. So
it
let
is.
me go back to, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure how you can articulate this, but so
Mm-hmm.
there's two parts of the story for me. There's my first encounter with you. There's my second encounter with
Mm-hmm.
you, which was about 7 years apart. And then there's my
Yep.
current experience with you as you provide me some life coaching. And that's been really helpful because you've helped me, uh, work through some really challenging, just life
Mm-hmm.
patterns. And the older I get, the more I recognize, and, I think everybody needs a therapist. Everybody needs a
Yeah.
therapist. Everybody needs a coach. Everybody needs a professional coach. And
For
I have a
sure.
professional coach.
Yep.
And I think everybody needs a life coach, and everybody probably needs a therapist.
Yeah.
We and particularly maybe men, but it's like we don't need anybody. And for years I lived my life by that. I don't need anybody to help me.
Sure.
But as
Sure.
I've grown and matured, I think in my
Mm-hmm.
thinking, I've come to a point where I recognize that I need help. But I look at those 2 points I encountered you,
Mm-hmm.
2020 to 2012 to 2013, and then in 2020.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know how much of your journey you would like to share with people, but
Mm-hmm.
how is it, like, before we get into what you want to do and what you do now in life
Yeah.
coaching, here's my question to you is,
Mm-hmm.
you became a different person.
Yeah.
You are fundamentally a different person, to me at least.
Mm-hmm.
How did that happen?
It basically a lot of pain, actually. I had taken a really big risk and I had made a really big life decision to move to a place where I always felt like I wanted to be. And I was following this heart space I was looking for. And I ended up in a situation, in a relationship that really just broke me. And it really just felt like the worst thing that could have happened. Obviously in hindsight, I'm so grateful for the experience and the person that I was in this relationship with. But what had happened is that it had broken me open into seeing either what wasn't working or what hadn't been working up until that point in my life. That was my own patterns to sift through and look through and recognize that, okay, this is me. This is who I truly am, not the person that up until that point I had been going through life as, not wholly and completely anyway. So it really came from this almost what felt like to me a traumatic incident that mirrored some of the trauma I felt like I had experienced in a childhood. Yeah. So really it was like painful. I mean, it's not unlike birth where it's,
Mm-hmm.
it's messy and, there's a lot of unpredictable things that happen. But what came out on the other side was this understanding of, like all of the cultural expectations that I just decided I wasn't going to own those or carry those anymore. So it was from that experience I actually found a shaman who I did some journeying with. If anyone's familiar with shamanic practice, it's somewhat like a hypnotherapy if you're looking at the science perspective. So I saw this person, the shaman, as somewhat of a therapist, and started delving into the spiritual side, trying to wonder why I kept attracting such a traumatic experience back into my life. So it was really born from that pain.
Wow. Well, yeah, and I guess like you said, like all births, they have the promise of something wonderfully new, but there is
Mm-hmm.
obviously there is pain in the process, and
Yeah.
now I've never had a baby, so I've been there
Me
twice.
neither, for the record.
Well, there you go. But for the record,
Yeah.
I have been there twice, and I imagine
Mm-hmm.
it's rather painful. But out
Yeah.
of it comes something joyous. So
Yeah.
this is a really interesting thing, and I guess the thing that I want people to really understand at this point in the conversation, and then this is why it's important to me in the arc of this
Mm-hmm.
idea of uncommodification, is
Yeah.
uncommodifying is painful. Changing is painful.
Oh man.
Giving up old patterns, giving up our old masks,
Mm-hmm.
shedding our
For sure.
stereotypes, standing out and putting our head above the crowd. Although it seems it's wonderful,
Mm-hmm.
it is. There is a lot of pain in this journey, and that's why I think so many people just
Yeah.
fall into the background,
Stay.
sit down, shut up, fall in
Mm-hmm.
line, because
Yeah.
it's easier. Just
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like an archetypal sort of hero's journey. If we're looking at it from
Mhm.
a Joseph Campbell perspective, there's this opportunity that's allowed all of us, that if we decide to, we can break out of whatever framework we had learned. And on the other side of that is not only our true selves, but it also lights up our true path,
Yeah.
from my perspective anyway.
No,
Yeah.
and I remember one of the coaching sessions that we
Mm-hmm.
had, and we talked a little bit about Jung's ideas around the shadow self, and that
Mm-hmm.
and again, it's really painful to start looking at ourselves
Yeah.
in these ways. If we're going to change, if we're going to reinvent ourselves, if we're going to do something different, the journey isn't going to just be all rose petals and giggles. It's there's a
Yeah.
lot of ugly shit inside sometimes that
Mm.
you have to deal with, and if you don't deal with it, eventually,
Yeah.
as you said, I guess it just keeps coming back around at you somehow.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And even working through all that pain, in hindsight now, I know how much more painful it would have been for me personally to stay in that space, wearing somebody else's life, pretending that was going to be emotionally or fulfilling, or, a path to
mhm.
my happiness.
Yeah.
So,
So interesting. So let me ask you. I do have. There's one question I
mhm.
have, and then we'll move on to some other. But when I look at an old photo of myself, I clearly can see that I'm aging. Like
Mhm.
I'm in my mid 50s now, and I was 20. I was 20 yesterday, but I'm not 20 anymore. And
Me
and
too.
yeah, but every day when you experience yourself, you don't see yourself
Mhm.
aging, but when you look at an old picture, you do. So it's very clear for
Yeah.
me that I have a snapshot of you in my mind in
Yeah.
2013 when I last saw you. And then I have the snapshot of when I encountered you in Vancouver in January
Mhm.
2020. And
Yeah.
you looked like a different person to me. Like
Yeah.
fundamentally
Wow.
looked different. So here's a question I have for
Wow.
you. Did you notice the metamorphosis that you were going through on the outside as much as the inside? Or do you just see it? If you were to look at a photo from yourself in the past and you were
Mhm.
to look at a photo now, would you just see it?
I mean, I did notice, and I have noticed how much, as much as like my insides and like, the as within, so without. So like my belief systems and a lot of the other like thought patterns had been changing. And, thusly my outside was a little bit different, and there's also like, I feel like I was a little bit of a late bloomer in general, but yeah, I think the more I liked myself, the more my appearance actually changed quite a bit. And I mean, for me, it's something that like, I tend to be a little bit more on the humble side of things. So it is a little bit uncomfortable for me to talk about, but yeah, I do feel like I'm a more attractive person in general. And, maybe whether that's like coming from, the sort of energy around feeling better and feeling more like myself, more like I can be myself, that, somehow magically my appearance has changed as well.
Yeah,
So,
and the reason I bring it up, because it's fascinating to me, because I think
yeah.
it's part of this thing when we start to shed this
Mm-hmm.
thing that cloaks us, and we shed it, and again, whether we're shedding it in a business context, we're shedding it in a
Mm-hmm.
family context, we're shedding it in a social context, or whatever it is. But when again, I would describe it as when we're uncommodifying, when we're moving out of the din of
Mm-hmm.
everything and we're changing, it changes everything. and and
Mm-hmm.
and I and I really believe, there's an old proverb that says the eyes are the window of the soul,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's like, and then I think it goes on to say something like, if the eye is clear, then everything is clear. It's a sense, and they used to diagnose medical conditions, and there's still
Oh,
a
wow.
science around this, where they look at people, you look at irises and stuff, and they can tell all this stuff
Mm-hmm.
about you, or illnesses and stuff. It's like, this is a window. And so the idea that you're changing on the inside and somehow that's working itself on the outside, I guess, shouldn't be that surprising, but I think
Mm-hmm.
it is. It's surprising to us, right?
Yeah. And to me too. It's, and for me to hear, from you about changing so fundamentally from the time we had first seen each other, it is a little bit surprising, but it's also not as surprising. And I think that moving through life, it's just so much easier, and opportunities, like I'm not willfully forcing things as much as I used to. So it seems like a lot less hard work
Hmm.
in general now that I've
Interesting.
stepped more into myself.
Well, you're obviously cooperating with something that was
Yeah.
more meant to be, and whether we
Mm-hmm.
call it destiny, call it whatever we want, but I think as we begin to find
Yeah.
ourselves, our true selves,
Mm-hmm.
there's something that happens as we do that. And again, I think, in the way I would describe it, we talked about birth. Children are born in a
Yeah.
totally uncommodified state. They're totally unique.
Mm-hmm.
They're absolutely
Yeah.
unique. Their fingerprints and their toe prints, and
Mm-hmm.
they're totally unique. And clearly we teach them, and they learn to conform and commodify. But the essence of their true
Mm-hmm.
self is unique in and of itself. So maybe we're all back. Maybe we're all on a journey back towards that. Maybe that's part of what's happening.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that, because that was something I spoke out loud. I said, I just want to get to feeling like how I felt when I was a kid,
Hmm.
limitless. Like potential was everything and anything, and creativity was an everyday thing, not just a choice. Yeah, I had felt like I was trying to get back to the little version of me.
Yeah, and it's and that's an interesting journey. I mean, I often think about that, like, that there's a difference between, so it's that naivety that we,
Mm-hmm.
obviously children have this wonderful naivety, and I mean, I think it's a criticism when you're adult to say, oh, you're naive, right? But there is a wonderment.
Yeah.
There's a wonderment about being in a
Mm-hmm.
place of that naivety, where we're not jaded, we're not mistrustful, we're not all of these things because of our
Mm-hmm.
life experience. There's something really wonderful. I remember years ago, I remember seeing a little, I think it was a story in a storybook, but it was of this little girl. There's a thunderstorm going on, lightning was happening, and her dad woke up and couldn't find her, and so he comes down into the living room to find her, and she's standing at the front window, but she has her head outside the curtains, and the rest of her body's sort of, he can see her body, and her head's outside
Yeah.
looking out, and he said to her, "What are you doing?" And the little girl said, "Shh, God's taking my picture." like for the light, like the lightning flash, you know. So again, just
Oh, that's so
and
cute.
we go, you know, but you know, what if we could go back to a place where we, you know, you know, we actually believed that there was something really good about that state of our
Yeah.
being.
Well, and like feeling like you have this unlimited potential. You can write your own story. There's a framework that's already set up for you to, okay, so you get into this career field or line or whatnot. Instead, it's open. Oh, why do I have to do that? Why can't I just, chase butterflies or draw all day or, whatever it might
Whatever we
be.
want to.
So
Well, and
yeah.
I think that's the thing is that as much as we have things we need to do to earn money and all those things, I really do
Yeah.
believe that, you know, sometimes, you know, your passion pays and sometimes it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the essence of who you are pays and sometimes it doesn't. But it always
Yeah.
rewards us when we follow it.
Yeah. It's so true.
I mean, absolutely. So you talked a little bit earlier about the sort of the spiritual, some of the spiritual journey you've been on.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, obviously, again, we've got this consulting coaching, and if we think of spirituality on one level, and I'll choose a word. I mean, there's lots of other words I could choose on the balance of that. I'm going
Yeah.
to choose the word secular. It's not a word
Okay.
that I don't think we use a lot. Maybe people don't really fully understand its meaning, but you know, the word itself, when you think about it, it's actually it has a Latin root, and it really literally means temporal or this or of this present age. That's the original Latin
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to secular. So we have the
Yeah.
temporal. So we have the temporal, the thing that's passing
Mm-hmm.
away somehow, and then we've got the spiritual, whatever that is. And again, I have probably listeners who define that in lots of different ways. But when you
Yeah.
look at this idea of secular and sacred or secular and spiritual, how is
Mm-hmm.
how is that coming together in your life today, and what does it mean to you?
I mean, for me, it really has to do with this head and heart space. So, this combination of moving out of where I was before into where I am now, which is listening more to my heart and being guided potentially by something that I don't even really understand where it comes from, but being quiet and following instead of willfully pushing my way into life, which I had done, and the results were, felt like a lot of hard work and some painful missteps. But once I started to move into the spiritual space, I was able to put the secular part of my world in. It just sort of came together a lot better when I started to feel a lot more guided by my heart and be more open to, being quiet and hearing and looking for clues and wondering about, okay, so, who am I really, and where do I really want to go? Like, how do I want to write my story?
Hmm, interesting. So, so when you look at the, you know, the spiritual experiences that you're
Yeah.
bailing out, you talked about doing some work with a shaman, so shamanism, and
Mm-hmm.
that's something that you've found value in exploring. A-
Yeah.
As you've explored that, um, how is that changing
Mm-hmm.
the way that you think or you feel about things? Like, what effect is that having for you from your
Mm-hmm.
perspective?
Well, it's made me realize how much everything is connected, and even more than we even believe. A lot of the shamanic ceremonies I sat in and some of those groups that I gathered in, it just was so almost otherworldly. Some of the experiences that we were having that were really quite common, and you know, maybe 3 out of 10 people in a group would have had a very extremely similar experience during these circles that we sat in. So just really understanding that there is a reason why we're here, and finding out what that reason is that is unique to us, in my opinion, is kind of the point of why we're here. It's like learning and changing and evolving, but really coming more to the essence of who we truly are is, on the inside.
Hmm.
So yeah, it really just showed to me how connected everything was.
Interesting. So as you envision sort of the next season of transition for you, as you
Hmm.
know, as you move into the next 3, 4 years, you know, you're just beginning your life coaching practice. I don't know if practice is the right word, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so what in a perfect world, what does life look like for you 3 years from now? Now I know what you just said.
Yeah.
You're not forcing all these things to happen, but if you were to visualize for a second, what's your perfect life look? What 3 years from now? What are you doing more of? What are you doing less of in 3 years?
Well, for me, I think it's more of this combination for people. I still feel like that's what I'm getting approached about. And sometimes it's not so much that my client understands what it is that's getting in the way of something, but helping them move into that heart space and open up there so that we can understand, get clues, look at patterns, see how it's all connected, so that then they can have more information to move forward. But 3 years from now, I envision that being like a million different types of clients, like not one type of person, but mostly just people who come to me with like a problem. Okay, what's the problem? Let's talk about this. And hopefully for me, where I find the most satisfaction comes from this, okay, this spiritual, I don't know where I am on my path. And I have this understanding and these beliefs and this clue as to like who I am truly and what I'd really like to be doing with the time that I have here. I think that's what would speak to me the most. And if that does end up impacting their business or something more in the secular world, that's great. But I really love when people are able to open up and just, talk about the things that come from their heart.
Hmm. So
Hmm.
are you starting like the people, like obviously our connection was a business connection in the beginning,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
and now it's become you know, a coaching relationship where
Hmm.
you're coaching, you're providing life coaching to me, and you're involved now with this group of consultants that I've been working with.
Yeah.
But so do you see that most of your initial customers or clients will come out of your do you think they'll come out of your business relationships and that will start the framework, or are they coming from different places? Like what's organically happening for you
Hmm.
right now?
Generally, right now, it's coming not so much from the business side, especially in my current business development role, to date. It doesn't necessarily attract the most spiritually minded. It's just a very different industry.
Right.
Not to say that there aren't people involved in that, of course. But right now, I'm just noticing people coming to me, especially women right now who've been, quite negatively affected by the pandemic in a lot of ways. So, women who are staying at home a little bit more, or like friends who are underemployed, or, just really nervous about what life's going to look like for them. And it happened very organically last week. I met with, an old friend who is now a new friend since she's moved back. And we just chat about some of the things happening in her life, some of the patterns we were looking at. And then it kind of came down to like how she could pivot her business in an online world that's, increasingly more online and everyone's working from home. So it's really just, it tends to be people outside of my business world who are showing up that, maybe I have an empathic ear, and we start chatting about something personal, but then it turns into like, okay, so in my head, I automatically go towards like, well, how can you be more prosperous? Like, there's got to be a creative solution to get you where you want to be. And for her, that means working from home, but making more money than she was previous. So,
Sure. Well,
yeah.
yeah, that's interesting. And you know, I think this is the thing is that, you know, again, there isn't you don't push stop totally and then push start on something else. There's these
Yeah.
transitions, and you're in this class, you're in this really wonderful transition in relationship to who you are as a person, but also what you do, your career, what you want to do,
Hmm.
how you want to use the gifts that you have. So
Hmm.
you're in this season of that transition. Again, we can think
Yeah.
of a, I think sometimes it's interesting. We go back to that birth analogy for a second. I've often thought of it this way.
Mm-hmm.
Like we tend to think of when we talk about the beginning of something, we talk about birth, but in
Yeah.
fact, birth is not the beginning of something. It's conception and then gestation
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
birth. Then there's the birth is the revealing.
Mm-hmm.
It's so
Yeah.
I think for whatever reasons we sort of think that, well, the life of that child begins at birth. Well, no, it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe our journeys are sort of like that. Maybe there's conception, meaning conception
Yeah.
first. We conceive it in our minds. We think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a conception. There's a seed of something that begins to, germinate and
Yeah.
begin to breed life. And then there's gestation, and it
Mm-hmm.
grows. If I think of this from an analogy perspective, a human perspective, it grows hidden, it grows in the dark, it grows
Yeah.
unseen, which is
Mm-hmm.
maybe this is part of that journey, right? And then there's
Right.
then there's the birth, and so which we think we say is the beginning, but the beginning
Mm-hmm.
is something different. So you're on this
Yeah.
journey, which is really awesome, and something's been birthed in you, and now it's starting to be revealed.
Yeah.
It's something other people can see, and then it begins to develop like any child, right? And
Yeah. It starts to form.
yeah, and I think that's a helpful analogy, because when I talk to people about standing up and being different and changing and
Mm-hmm.
uncommodifying, it's so easy to see it as, okay, I just choose and I do it and it's done, but it's a process, and you're in this
Mm-hmm.
wonderful
Mm-hmm.
process. So let me ask you a question. As you look at
Mm-hmm.
yourself and standing out from the crowd, and even as you get into this space of life coaching, you know I,
Yeah.
I hate to tell you, you probably already know this, you won't be the only life coach. There's other life coaches.
No,
So,
I've
so
heard.
yeah. So here's my question. So how are you going to uncommodify yourself? How are you going to stand out from the crowd of other people who are
Mm-hmm.
doing this thing? What does uncommodifying look like for you on a very practical level? How do you see yourself
Mm-hmm.
approaching this experience maybe a little bit different? Because I know my own experience with you has been different,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
than other experience I've had with other people I've chatted with. So I would say that your approach is different, but you might not even
Mm-hmm.
perceive it's different. But what does it look like for
Yeah.
you to be standing out and standing up in this space?
Well, I mean, it definitely feels like exposing, because for me, what I think I'm doing is genuinely opening up my heart and understanding people where they're coming from. And I've also had coaches outside of the work that we've done together. I hired my own life coach, and what I felt about that experience, what was really missing was a human element to it. It was more like, how am I relating to this person on a human level, and less of like, I'm providing a service where you're accountable and all of those other amazing things that coaching has to offer, but genuinely having an ally who's sitting there with you in whatever it is you're going through, and being like, man, that's, that feels terrible, I'm sure, and being able to like empathize with people, open up my heart, and also open up my intuition, that, hopefully I can shed some light on their path and say like, okay, if you're stuck, maybe don't look here, but what about over there? Maybe just have a peek over there. So I see it as being a little bit more of a guide than some coaches, but also coming from, I had a vast experience of many different types of like therapeutic modalities growing up, coming from what I felt was, a traumatic childhood scenario. So essentially what I've been doing in this self-healing part of my life is learning how to help other people understand, not necessarily providing these therapeutic um, services to people, but walking next to them and saying, I understand your pain in this journey and where you'd like to be. And so for me, I feel it's a really personal, almost like cracking myself wide open so I can help somebody find their path.
Interesting. And I would say, my own experience when I think of the conversations that you and I have had,
Mm-hmm.
I've often left those conversations. First of all, I've most often found myself having conversations I didn't intend to. So that's the first thing
Mm-hmm.
that I would say that has been arresting is the word I'll use.
Yeah.
So I many times when we've gotten together and I've had a specific thing, maybe
Mm-hmm.
I've wanted some help thinking through. What I've noticed in the
Yeah.
conversations that I've had with you is that I often I'm having a conversation I never intended to. What I've come to believe,
Mm-hmm.
it's the conversation that I probably really wanted to have, and it's
Yeah.
very much the conversation I needed to have, but it wasn't the conversation
Yeah.
that was really top of mind or conscious to me before we got
Mm-hmm.
into the coaching session, and you asked me some brilliant questions. And anybody who knows me well enough knows that I love questions. Questions are
Yeah.
they're the arrows I shoot every day. But
Yeah.
when you turn those questions on me and ask them to me, they've become super thought provoking, and they've caused me to think
Mm-hmm.
about my life and think about things differently. And you talked earlier about an empathetic ear. That is one thing I would say that in my
Mm-hmm.
experience with you is that you do have a gift to listen well, but to listen empathetically, to listen with a sense of
Mm-hmm.
understanding what that feeling is that's being expressed. So in my own experience, it's been it's been powerful. It has been
Mm-hmm.
challenging, and you've also given me some really good self work to do. And
Yeah.
I'm a person whom I'm always giving other people work to do. That's what I do for a living. I give people things to do, and I
Yeah.
help them develop. But it's so important to continue to work on ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, I'm not done this journey of uncommodifying myself, of standing out for all the right reasons,
Yeah.
of changing. I've got lots of baggage. I've got lots of stuff in my life that keeps me back from being my better self and my better angel and all the things that I know I ought to do on a regular basis. The one thing I would say is that
Yeah.
the conversations that I've had with you have been really, really important in the sense that they've helped me think through and shape certain things. You haven't been directive. You haven't told me what to do, but you've helped
Mm-hmm.
me tell myself what to do. And that's sort of the way I would characterize that. And,
Yeah.
and anybody listening in, my encouragement to you is, I mean, there's several. One, you know, if Shelby's the kind of person that you might want to talk to, you should find her.
Mm-hmm.
Find her online or find her on LinkedIn, or just find her. And in this day and age, you
Yeah.
don't have to be in Vancouver. You can find her anywhere. But if you're in
No.
Vancouver and you're looking for somebody who can help you think
Mm-hmm.
through and help you understand what's going on in your life and help you find some new things for you, um, I would highly recommend that you talk to Shelby. If
Yeah.
you can't
Thank
find
you.
Shelby, then find somebody. Find somebody. Find a
Yeah.
if you're a professional and you don't have a coach, get a coach.
Yeah.
Get a business coach if that's what you want. If what you want to have
Yep.
is a life coach, get a life coach. But get somebody who can come alongside you and
Mm-hmm.
ask you amazing questions and help you think through the complexity of what's going on in your life. Because at the end
Yeah.
of the day, if you want to go on a journey to uncommodify, to change yourself, to throw off all of this, the convention and the convenience of just fitting in and falling in line, you're going to need some help in that process. This is not a journey for the faint of heart. It
Yeah.
really isn't. And I know from my own experience, it has been so
Mm-hmm.
powerful, in interacting with you. So here's my question as we wrap up today,
Mm-hmm.
just to finish up. So
Yeah.
what I want you to give a word of encouragement to people. So if you were sitting down
Yeah.
right now coaching somebody, and
Mm-hmm.
you wanted to say something to them that would just encourage them and help them find light in the
Yeah.
midst of some darkness, or find joy
Yeah.
in the midst of sadness, what would you want to tell them?
Hmm. Well, be curious about your life and understand that you're actually writing your own story, and you can change it at any point and you can rewrite it in any different perspective. So essentially, what's happened in your life is happening for you, not to you. So yeah, just be curious and be willing to unlearn and change and uncommodify.